What made you ghost a friend? Story 1. When I came home to find the power off. Bill hadn't been paid. We were friends from work. He had split up from his ex and I needed to be closer to work. We went 50-50 on a rental. He has 3 kids from the previous relationship. With me being the nerd, I agreed to pay the tech bills, internet, phone, cable TV. He agreed to pay the power as he burnt more because his kids were over on access visits. Came home. Dark house. Investigate. He hadn't paid the power for ages because his new girlfriend wanted the money. Then I discovered he wasn't paying his rent either. Same reason. Down $5,000. Power, rent, we were evicted. Ghosted. Story 2. We had been friends for years. Like long-term sisterhood kind of shoot. I did so much for her over the years and didn't even bat an eyelash. I asked her to watch my cat while I went on a 10-day vacation. A cat that she also loved because it belonged to her family before me. She agreed to watch the cat. I even called her about 4 days into my vacation to ask her again to go and check on my cat to make sure it had food, water, and a few scritches. When I came home, my cat's water and food bowl were bone dry, and she let out the most tormenting meows I have ever heard. My friend didn't check on her. Once, in the 10 days that I was gone, she played stupid when I confronted her about it and said, "Oh, I completely forgot." That was the beginning of the end. Edit. As for ghosting her, I had to. After the cat incident, she tried to make me feel guilty for being mad at her for it. I think I even ended up apologizing because she was so beside herself. A few more disagreements accrued after that, and I was always put on a guilt trip. I decided that I didn't need that negativity in my life anymore, and I ghosted her. To this day, she tries to get back to me. Even through mutual friends, she badmouths me, then tells them how much she misses me. Chick is whack. Story 3. She started hanging out with a new friend. That's fine, I'm not her only friend. Then, while we were hanging out, as pre-planned, she would leave to go hang out with her new friend. Then she'd break plans with me to hang out with her, all while tagging her on Facebook, so none of it was being hidden. 3 years later, she reaches out to me and apologizes. It's genuine, as she mentioned insightful things she would have no way of knowing unless she had grown and been very honest with herself. We are friends for another 2 years when she starts to hang out with another new friend. Repeat. Answer. I'm sorry that happened to you, so shoot. I had a friend with which I was making huge efforts, at her request, to be a good friend. I held her hand through ridiculous things. The best support she ever gave me was disapproving silence, and she would take everyone's word about the worst things they could make up about me without a second's pause. She last-minute canceled a celebration lunch I was planning for her get her license, late at, like 24 saying something important just came up. Then she posted about being out to lunch, celebrating with my former best friend. I ghosted, and still haven't heard a peep. I love my current friends so much more, but fudge thinking about this again made me sad. Why was it so easy to believe the worst? Throw me away so publicly like that. Story 4. Started talking shoot about me to my GF and best mate. His dad had a history of drinking problems, and he was starting to exhibit the same behavior. So I suggested we should both take a break from drinking for a while and try to focus on some healthier shoot. He apparently took that as I'm not the same person and my GF was the person who changed me. Answer. My boyfriend's best friend was a girl. When we first started dating, she approached me while I was alone because she needed to talk to me. She started telling me weird things about him under the pretense of concern. He doesn't have any money. He will never take care of you. He's brain damaged. He's just learned how to read. "You're too good for him. He's nothing," etc. She said, at 2 different times, "Oh, but he is really good in bed, so just keep him for that," while watching my face for a reaction. Then she went to him and said I begged her for information about him, that I had asked how much money he made, if he would financially support me, etc. About his ex-girlfriends, things that were so obviously out of character or logic. She also had problems with drinking, so it wasn't a surprise to my boyfriend, and he confronted her about it outright. She couldn't admit to any of it, instead making up more lies and blaming me, so he had to end the friendship. It's unfortunate because they'd been friends for so long and she was fun to hang out with, but it's hard to keep friendships when people aren't truthful with themselves. Story 5. Getting ditched every time there's a new guy on the scene, but been expected to be there the second it all breaks down. Answer: are you me? That's what finally eliminated my relationship with my best friend, the realization that I was always second fiddle to whoever was between her legs for now. We had been best friends since the beginning of college, and we lived together. The night of graduation, she blew me off because a cute guy she'd recently met was in town and wanted to go out. I spent the night in our apartment, by myself, reading Divergent. Story 6. When you realize that they're never really there for you and your friendship only breeds passive aggressiveness and envy. Story 7. When I realized a lot of the things that made her laugh were at my expense, she thrived off of humiliating me. Story 8. I loved this girl. She was so clutch for me when my life was in ruins. The issue was that she and I were both addicts at the same time, and both came from the same types of affluent families. But for whatever reason, I got clean and I turned my life around while she got worse. She and I were both addicts with eating disorders, alcoholism, and both addicted to Xanax. I got clean and only recently, 7 years later, have started experimenting with maybe 1 or 2 beers per month if I'm out with my husband. She ended up with this awful guy who she will not give up, who got her hooked on meth. I was there for her for a long time. After rehab and a few arrests, she stayed at my house for a bit on 2 different occasions. But the last time she did, she tore my house apart looking for adult beverage, which we didn't have, stole my ID so she could get Postmates to deliver vodka to my house, and nearly got us both eliminated by grabbing and yanking my steering wheel while I was going 80 miles up I-95. I've tried so many times to help her get and stay clean, but she keeps going back to that guy and her triggers are my triggers. I had to distance myself because she was making me relapse. Story 9. Every conversation was about them and their lives. They rarely asked or were interested in what I had going on. The selfishness was just too much after a while. Answer: I invited an old friend for lunch a couple months back, and this is exactly how it went. We've more or less gone our own paths, so we have different friends and schedules, etc. But at one point, we were best friends. Amongst other stuff, this just solidified my decision to let things die off naturally. She didn't ask a single question about me when there's plenty to go off of, but I listened to a lot about her. She was really interested when it came to my jobs and how much I was making. Well, yalutal. Story 10. She burned the bridge. For most of the 1.5 years that she and I started working at the same place, she bullied me, micromanaged me, made me feel left out, and gaslighted me whenever I tried to confront her behavior. It was almost always my fault. Nothing I ever did was right, and she refused to believe that she has control issues or that she was using me as a punching bag. She started doing this thing where she wouldn't text me unless I texted her first, and then get mad if I didn't text her. So, once she quit the job, I stopped texting her. I haven't spoken to her at all since August 2019, and I don't regret it. Story 11. I have a friend who I probably should have stopped talking to long before I did, but his escapades include slept with my ex of 3 years a week or so after we broke up, got really handsy with my sister, against her will, at my 21st, just being a general creep to girls for a long time. Edit. To clarify, I do not talk to this person anymore, and these were the events that definitely turned the tide almost immediately. There were other, less serious things prior. Answer. Solidarity. Haven't talked to my best friend after he slept with my fiancée of 3 years. The rest of my exes I wouldn't have cared. But she was the person I was gonna marry, and the breakup was super messy. Day before, we were gonna fly out for a week to a resort for my birthday, tickets and room paid for, and she says she doesn't feel the same way anymore and leaves. Got over her, but she'll always be the one that got away from me. Then to hear from her that she slept with him a few years later? Rough. You're not alone, man. Sorry that happened to you too. Shouldn't ever happen to anyone. Hope you're better off now, mate. Story 12. When I've realized she was maybe my best friend, but I was not her. In fact, I was only useful to her. Story 13. He knocked on my door one night and said, "Let's go for a drive." This wasn't that odd, since I love driving to cool my head. So we start driving, and maybe 10 minutes in, he starts directing me on where to go. He asks me if I mind making a quick stop. I'm annoyed, but say sure. We end up at this sketchy house in the middle of nowhere, and my buddy goes inside but tells me to wait in the car. Almost 45 minutes later, he comes back out and says, "We gotta go to the bar." It takes me about 10 seconds to realize this POS went in there to get Coke and was already high, so I tell him that I'm not feeling it. Tonight and drop him off at his place. Spoke to him once after that when he wanted to hang, and I told him, I'm nobody's errand boy. Never gave a shoot if he got the message because I haven't spoken to him since. Answer. Wow, super similar story to mine. I feel for you. Had a really good friend through elementary and middle school. He ended up moving one city over, but we still hung out when we could. Then he got big into substances at his high school, and he stopped contacting me as much. One day he calls me up and asks if I want to hang out after we hadn't seen each other for months. Cool, I think. He asks if I can pick him up since his car is in the shop. Sure, no problem. I get him. He hops in and asks if we can swing by his work so he can collect his pay. Okay, not too far out of the way, so we go there. Then he spends like 30 minutes there chatting with some coworker. We head back to my place and he is texting on his phone with someone the whole ride, basically ignoring any attempt at conversation. Finally get to my house and I suggest we play some guitar, like usual. Nah man, I'm gonna get going. Then whoever he was texting picks him up and leaves. About 15 years later and I haven't willingly seen him again. Bumped into him like once in my college years. What I've heard from mutual friends is he ended up with major substances problems, and his family basically disowned him after he stole his mom's checkbook. Just a few weeks ago, he sent a borderline incoherent, rambling message to my wife through social media, asking me to get a hold of him. Yeah, no thanks. Story 14. My best friend growing up was a kid I lived next door to from the age of 9 until 18. At school, he would pretend not to know me so he could seem cool to the popular kids. He would invite me places, then ditch me. He would break plans so he could free up time to hang with his cooler friends. That shoot got real old, real fast. When I was 18, I moved to the other side of town. We were growing apart more and more, but I would still try to hang out with him when I could. Well, one day he asked me to come over to his house and play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater when it first came out. I was so pumped that I Walked 3 miles to his house only to be told that he was going to go hang out at his other friend's house instead, but could I babysit his brothers and sisters? Needless to say, things weren't the same after that. I stopped answering his calls. He would stop by and I would leave just to avoid him. He would make plans to hang out and I never bothered going. I just gave up on trying to be friends with that guy. I tried so hard for almost 10 years just to be a good friend to him, and he just pushed me to the wayside. Maybe I'm a jerk for stooping to his level, but I don't care anymore. Answer: the beginning of this. I feel you, fam. I had a friend that told everyone at school I was crazy because I saw a psychiatrist. My grandparents sent me and my brother to a psychiatrist when I was 10 and he was 6 because our parents divorced. She had everyone at school thinking I was a nutcase, and she was all about that. Im above you shoot. It got old, but I felt like I had to be her friend because our families were really close. So we hung out after school often, but at school we were strangers. Well, when I was 17, I got into a really bad car accident, and she was the only friend I called. She said so. You're okay, right? And it was just the most uncaring tone I'd ever heard. I was probably being dramatic, but IDK, I was still panicked that the EMS told us they didn't know how we walked out of that alive. Meanwhile, she was waking up from some sort of hangover that found her outside on the ground in someone else's clothes. At 23, I had it when she blasted my mom all over social media about my parents divorcing when I was a child. I don't know why she did it to this day. She texted me an apology I've never responded to, and we've spoken once since because she had a little girl and she told me she wanted her baby to know who I was. I couldn't do it. Story 15. Too much drama. Told a sob story in order to garner sympathy points. Story didn't check out and no one believed her, so she got even more angry about it. Decided to book it because her stories and blame games were getting too much for me. Story 16. Too much insult humor. Really fudge my esteem, edit. Since I can't possibly respond to all these and keep my sanity, we were friends for a while and it was almost always insult humor, and that combined with a shitstorm of other things just got to me, and I took it personally and ended up blowing up at them. Now I really don't have any way to talk to them and don't care anymore. Story 17. That realization that you're the one initiating all the interactions with them, and when you stop, they don't notice. Answer. When I mentioned to a friend that I was always the one to reach out, she told me, "Oh, well, I don't like calling people, so I will never be the one to reach out. I just don't do that." So I stopped calling, and yup, she never reaches out. But if I see her somewhere, she always says we need to get together someday. To which I respond my phone number and email haven't changed in 10 years. She laughs, and I never see her until the next random encounter. Story 18. Guy told me, "You'll never be a good teacher." After 2 years of unemployment following my graduation with a teaching degree, I realized the bastard had meant every joking insult he'd ever said to me. Story 19. Her fiancé was arrested and did jail time for possession of child-adult content. When he got out, she married him and talked about how excited she was to have children with him. Edit. I understand that people are concerned about any children that are born to these people. I'm concerned too. That said, I cut off contact with her 6 years ago. I can't FB stalk her due to her privacy settings. I also moved a few time zones away, so I'm not in the same social circle as her anymore either. All I can do is hope that the people who are still in her orbit do their due diligence. It sucks, but that's the option available to me. Story 20. When I was in college, I, M, and a friend, M, went out drinking with a mutual friend, F. We drank enough to decide to all crash at my apartment, which was within walking distance of the bar. My female friend passed out on the sofa as soon as we got there. I shot the shoot with my friend for about 10 minutes before he started talking about my passed out girl, looking at her and saying things like, I could fudge her right now and she'd never know. I'm ashamed that I didn't kick him out. What I did was stay up all night sitting in a chair next to her, just to make sure he didn't violation. Her. Fudge that guy. Needless to say, I ghosted him after that night. Edit. Thanks for the awards, guys. To those saying maybe he was just mouthing off, no. The things he was saying were just way over the line. Freaked me out. I kept trying to get him to go sleep it off in my bedroom, but he kept saying, nah, I'll just crash in this chair next to her. Story 21. Depression. Keeping up communication is rough sometimes. A day of not replying to a message can become a week when you don't know how to explain that you just couldn't be around people that day, which can become a month when it always seems impossible to reach out and explain where you've been. Thankfully, my friends are the understanding sort and don't give me too hard a time, but I still feel like a jerk. Answer. Same here. I almost ghosted my best friend because I was still getting out of a bad situation when I met them. I felt guilty because I loved them and because I remembered that they had problems in the past with being abandoned, so I couldn't be another person to leave them behind. They ended up being the most amazing and supportive friend I've ever had. I did get out of that bad situation because they helped me. Story 22. He became obsessed with me telling me he loved me and things in front of my friends, basically acting as if I was his girlfriend, became super angry and jealous whenever I talked to my other friends, guys, told me that when I visited him, he was in the US, him in Canada, I would have to sleep in his bed, after I made it very clear we were not, nor ever will be, a thing. He then started reaching out to my friends to get them to convince me to talk to him again. They told him to shove it after they found out why I ghosted him. It's been a few months now. I haven't regretted the decision. Story 23. Every time when there is a girl involved, this dude turns into the cringiest being there is, try-harding so much to get laid. In a group chat, when two girls were talking about what to wear for their girls' night out, he started bringing up panties, bras, and whatnot. I left that group, started a new one with everyone from the old group except him. Answer. That happened to me, except there were only 3 of us. Me and another guy and then a girl, and we were all so close and Skyped every day in high school because they were internet friends. Eventually, Guy felt threatened by me, even though everything was strictly platonic and we inevitably got into it, and she just kinda let it happen, so I dipped. Haven't spoken to the guy since, and I just recently stopped trying to reach out to the girl because I noticed I was starting every conversation and exhausting myself trying to talk. Story 24. The fact she wasn't putting effort in our friendship and just texted if she needed something, and she always made me feel like I am not welcome and wanted. So, nope, thanks. Story 25. When I realized she liked hating things more than liking them. I dislike beer, dislike EDM, dislike Marvel, dislike Channing Tatum, dislike football. These are all things she's said. It's okay that we don't enjoy the same things, but she'd go out of her way to let me know she disliked something and rarely talked about what she liked. Story 26. Whenever I would talk about feeling stressed and my mental health not being in an optimal condition, she would say something along the lines of, "Oh, come on, you don't have actual problems. There are people out there that actually have depression, anxiety, etc." She always downplayed the struggles I would be going through just because it wasn't the worst possible thing that could happen. Edit. I never thought this would receive so much support. Thank you everyone for your kind words. This means a lot. Story 27. Her 2-year-old was violent towards my 2-year-old. She thought it was normal and refused to correct his behavior. Story 28. Multi-level marketing. She was pretty aggressive with selling Monet to me and a couple other friends we shared, so much so that she started posting passive-aggressive messages about finding out who your true friends are when they don't support you, blah blah blah. I was trying to be nice and purchased 2 bottles to support her just once. And when she charged me, she had tacked on a bunch of fees that she didn't mention before. $100 spent to learn that real friends don't strong-arm you to buy and upcharge you their crap products. Story 29. I dislike to say it, but I've ghosted a couple of friends. It was after years of friendship, and I realized that everything was about them. The friendship was one-sided, and I felt undervalued. It got to the point that even though we were best friends, they had no idea what was happening in my life. A lot more happened that I don't care explaining, but I stopped talking to them after 11 years. Story 30. I was disinvited from his wedding, in which I was a groomsman, because he found out I wasn't a Christian. We'd been friends for a decade up until that point. Answer. My best friend of 8 years told me I couldn't be in her wedding because I was an atheist, and my being there would darn their marriage to hell. We stopped being friends that day. The kicker, the reason she got upset about my lack of religion, is because I had recently been in a mutual friend's wedding, and apparently I didn't close my eyes during the prayer. If she